All right, Genesis 15, let's call this one friend. Why? Because much like Genesis 1 helps us see the practical components of love before the word begins to literally mention it very much, chapter 15 gives us the practical components of friendship before the word begins to literally mention it very much as well. And so in a lot of ways that begins back in chapter 14 when, as we talked about, Abram comes back from a great victory and he does a really good job of sorting through the mixed crowd that could respond to our success when he sees in Melchizedek, king of Salem, a friend or an ally that can be trusted, but in the king of Sodom, he sees someone that he needs to be leery of. And so he's able to discern the difference between legitimate support and, shady or suspect responses to his success. And with that, he's really, for lack of a better term, on a roll because he's compounding his military victory with keen discernment. And that sets the context for him coming home, where God still is going to see that there's something going on with Abram that needs to be addressed. And that, in a lot of ways, is what real friendship is. It's no matter what's going on the outside, someone who is able to see the things that we still got to deal with that we could use some help with. And that sets the context for verse 1 of chapter 15, where it reads, "After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great." But Abram said, "O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus." And so in this, Abram is going to do something that's very important, and he is receiving the counsel of God, because it's one thing when it comes from God, but for us, we're often going to have to rely on friends, peers, and other folks who don't intimidate us as much as God can. And the difficulty can be when our friends hit a nerve, even if they're well-intentioned, sometimes it can cause us to reject what they're saying, no matter how legitimate it is. And that's one of our first hurdles, is when we hear something, if it causes us to bristle, are we rejecting the truth in what our friends are trying to get us to see? And it can be doubly hard to see when we're in a period of time when we're otherwise at a high point where outwardly we should be happy. And so what Abram does is he uses this as an opportunity not to shut down and withdraw and say, "What do you mean, God?" He opens up and he talks about what is really still going on, even though he should otherwise be happy. And that's going to help him out moving forward, as we see in the following verses. Verse 4, "And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said, this man shall not be your heir," speaking of Eliezer, who he believes is going to be his heir since he still doesn't have a son. Continuing on, though, "Your very own son shall be your heir." And he brought him outside and said, "Look toward heaven and number the stars. If you are able to number them." Then he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." Verse 6, "And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness." And so ultimately, God is effective in encouraging Abram. Abram believes him, but that's not going to be all that God does. Now that Abram believes, God's going to go further and give him more detail. And that's what friends can do. They not only encourage us, but they give us practical steps moving forward if they're able. Not every friend is able to do that. Sometimes, as opposed to God, who sees all and is described later on as a wonderful counselor, sometimes we just have to piece our friendships together, meaning one friend can give us encouragement and another can help us see a way forward. God's going to be able to do it all, because after encouraging Abram, now he's going to say, okay, this is what's going to happen. You're going to go this far, but your people are going to become a nation. They're going to endure difficult days. This isn't a fairy tale, but they're going to come through those difficult days stronger for the process. They're going to enter into slavery, but their slavery is actually going to provide riches. It's going to provide the foundation for them to move forward as a nation. And so he gives him not only, like we said, encouragement, but a vision and a plan ahead, so that as he's been encouraged by God, he can encourage his descendants not to be discouraged in the difficult days that are going to follow. Here's a question though. Now that Abram's been encouraged, he's going to have to go back into an environment where he's going to deal with a mix of individuals who may not believe and be as encouraged as he is. Some of them may doubt him. Some of them may doubt themselves, but either way, their doubts are going to compete with their ability to move forward effectively. And that's what we're going to see in chapter 16. It's the challenge of a man who is encouraged now having to go back and work with people who are still discouraged. And so hopefully we'll learn more about that tomorrow.